Yeah,
Namaste. A warm welcome to you all in yet another video of the DSM-5 series. Let me start off with three illustrations. First person refuses to go out of the house because this individual experiences an unexplainable disability to leave home. The second person is anxious the whole day for apparently no understandable reason. And in third case, the subject, even at 45, is unable to relocate to another city for a career-enhancing job, fearing separation from parents. Getting anxious is very normal human response. But when the reaction is not well defined or exaggerated, it becomes pathological and can be classified as a disorder on the anxiety spectrum. You guessed it right. Today in our show, we aim to discuss various facets of the anxiety spectrum disorder with our subject expert, Mr. Himanshu Vaidya, a very well experienced psychoanalysis consultant. Namaste, Mr. Vaidya.
namaste.
Let me start off with the very basic. What exactly is anxiety spectrum disorder or ASD?
Anxiety spectrum disorders are those disorders where anxiety is a central problem. Anxiety as a collateral problem or a collateral feature is spread across the whole of DSM. If you have schizophrenia, you can still have anxiety. When you have obsessive compulsive disorder, you still have anxiety. When you have depression, you can still have features of anxiety. But there, the central problem is not anxiety. In this chapter, the spectrum of anxiety disorders are those disorders where anxiety itself is the central problem. And the way the chapter is constructed, it is constructed on two principles. One, phenomenology, and two, chronology. So it gives account of a number of anxiety disorders, and the whole chapter is structured in the chronological way. So it's almost as though what disorders are most likely to happen over the age of the person. So there is a principle of chronology, and second, the description of a disorder is based upon phenomenology. It is not based upon intensity, not based upon causation, not based upon a theory of how to treat. It is essentially based upon a clinical approach of phenomenology. So this is how the whole chapter is, and it gives account of quite a number of anxiety disorders.
Sir, and what are the disorders covered under the DSM chapter of anxiety spectrum disorder?
Uh, it starts with selective mutism, uh, goes on to social anxiety disorder, goes on further to phobias, in specific, with a specific mention of agoraphobia, the phobia of spaces, goes on to generalized anxiety disorder, and then to panic disorder. These are the disorders where there is a substantial psychological component, and we would be discussing that aspect. There may be anxiety because of medical condition or because of medicines or some substance use. Those problems are more biochemically rooted problems, and those are not the subject matter for psychological interpretation. So that is how the whole chapter is.
Sir, you mentioned selective mutism. That is really interesting. Is it true that people, because of anxiety, do not speak in certain occasions?
Yeah, very strange but very true. And that brings us in a very vivid way the power of the unconscious and the power of the mind over body. because the word important here is selective.
Right.
Mutism means inability to speak, but it is selective. So
Hmm.
in certain situations, a person can speak, and in certain situations, a person cannot speak. The very fact that in certain situations he can speak means there is no organ defect per se.
Right.
There is no medical problem with the organs of speech, and yet the person is not able to use those very organs of speech because of a psychological issue. And this is something which brings out this whole power of emotions over our functioning. So selective mutism means that the person is not able to speak in certain contexts when the anxiety becomes very high. And this brings us the idea that anxiety can manifest itself in ways where on the surface it seems the symptoms have nothing to do with anxiety. For example, it may be inability to speak in selective mutism. And when we go to the chapter of conversion disorders, we get many such examples
Hmm.
where anxiety has got somatized into the body in the form of some spasm, in the form of some pain, in the form of some contraction, or in the form of inability to feel certain parts or use certain parts of the body. And this brings us this whole uh, uh, opens up the whole world of what are the different things anxiety can do to us, some of which are captured in the chapter on anxiety spectrum disorders. Some of the things are captured in the chapter on conversion disorder. And this is where the whole idea of anxiety once generated, what symptoms can it produce in the uh, somatic system, and what symptoms it can produce in the psychological part of our system, it all comes up. So selective mutism is a very strange case, a very interesting case, and a very good sample of
Hmm.
what anxiety or any other negative effect can do to create a difficulty which on the surface looks almost like a physiological difficulty having nothing to do with psychological effects, when in fact the psychological effect is at the root of the whole problem.
So, what are the essential elements in the entire chapter of anxiety spectrum disorder?
The essential elements are one, the element of catastrophic thinking that something wrong will happen. Two, the fear of disintegration. Three, the fear of break of attachment and pain. Fourth, the fear of humiliation or being mocked at. Five, the whole aspect of assault or pain coming because of somebody's action or some event happening. Sixth, helplessness and powerlessness. And seventh, uh, the existential component of anxiety. These are the seven elements which by and large in different combinations are spread across most of the disorders described in this chapter.
So, what is the psychological explanation of the causation of anxiety spectrum disorder?
Uh, in psychoanalytic view of things, first let us understand what we mean by anxiety. What are the types of anxieties? And then we go into the phenomena which psychoanalysis believes are responsible for generation of anxiety, from their generation of symptoms, and from there the disorders. So psychoanalysis distinguishes first between fear and anxiety. Fear is our response to an objective threat to our survival in the outside world. So if I am in front of a lion and I feel afraid of it, the feelings which I am fearing, which I am feeling, are the feelings of fear. There is an objective threat to my survival in the outside world. and most people in my situation would react the same way. So that kind of an response to an objective threat in the outside world, where I behave in a way as most people would behave, that emotion we call as fear. Anxiety is uh, an emotion very alike fear, but when it occurs and there is no objective threat in the outside world to my survival. I have an examination to go to and I feel anxious. I have to go on a stage and I feel anxious. I have to sign a business deal and I feel anxious.
Something which is more
Now,
perceived.
yeah, for many, this would be like occasions of progress, but for many, they would be occasions of anxiety. So everyone does not respond to the same way, and there is no objective threat in the outside world to my survival. So when I feel a fear-like feeling without an objective threat in the outside world, more because of something happening internal to me, which is more subjective and not absolutely objective, that kind of an emotion we call as anxiety. Now, anxiety itself is divided into two parts. The what we call anxiety in general and what is called signal anxiety. Right? Now, anxiety in general is the response that I feel when I am in front of a challenge and I believe something can go wrong. That is usually what we mean by anxiety. So mostly when we say anxiety, we mean this anxiety, the regular anxiety. There is another specialized kind of anxiety, which is called the signal anxiety. Signal anxiety is an anxiety which occurs when some negative emotion within ourselves slowly is coming to the surface. So if I am angry towards you, and if that anger is coming up towards surface, before the anger comes into my conscious mind, I will be flooded with anxiety. That a difficult emotion is coming up, and if it comes into your consciousness, it may cause you uncomfortable feelings. So whenever any negative effect arises towards the surface, right, before it is touching the surface, an anxiety comes up to forewarn us about the impending crisis. And that anxiety is what Freud calls as a signal anxiety. Okay? Now, both these anxieties, the regular anxiety and signal anxiety, can lead to disorders. Okay? Uh, Now let us look at the phenomena which are involved, which generate either of these two or both of these anxieties, and which ultimately results in high generation of anxiety, leading to symptoms, leading to disorders. So let us start right from birth. The first anxiety one feels when one is born is the what we call the annihilation anxiety. The anxiety that I may cease to exist. So every person who exists also has this anxiety, what if I cease to exist? Second anxiety is the survival anxiety of the body and harm to the body. What if something happens to my body? Third anxiety is the anxiety of disintegration. What if the whole of my being is blown to parts? Because the small infant sees sensations coming from all over the body which are not coordinated one whole. They seem like fragmented, disjointed sensations coming from different parts of the body, and there is nobody to coordinate the whole flux of sensations. So there is this fear of disintegration. Then we have the, in order to coordinate all this, an I is created, a psychological I. But it is not created in one straight successful attempt. It is created, it disintegrates. It is created, it disintegrates. That leads to the another sort of anxiety, the disintegration of the self anxiety, the psychological self. Then we have the anxiety of breaking free from the oceanic gestalt into an I and not I, which is a very new experience. So the infant is into sort of an oceanic gestalt, and from there it breaks into the situation of I and not I, and that is yet another anxiety. Then we have anxiety associated with the paranoid schizoid position. Thereafter, the anxiety associated with destructive envy and greed. Thereafter, the anxiety associated with object loss, the loss of the all good object. Thereafter, the feeling, the general anxiety of object loss and abandonment. Thereafter, the anxiety of oral rage and mistrust or feeling of inadequate availability of the mother in the oral phase. Thereafter, the anal anxieties of domination, submission, too much of order, too less order, repetition, the pull of the death drive. Thereafter, the Oedipal anxiety of object loss, castration, and guilt. Thereafter, the anxiety of identity, the anxiety of stepping into the teenage years, and thereafter, the anxiety of going out into the world. And before that, I forgot one, separation anxiety from the parents. Lastly, we have existential anxieties like anxiety of our mortality, anxiety of our limitedness, anxiety of the presence of the other who is free from us, anxiety of the gaze of the other, anxiety of the big other, the society, and lastly, the anxiety of our own freedom, the anxiety of our free choice and our responsibility. So all these are different phenomena to which anxiety arises. This is not an exhaustive list. Anxiety keeps arising 24/7 in 100 different ways. But everything does not lead to a pathology. I am standing at a bus stand and the bus is late by 5 minutes. I feel anxiety, but that is not going to cause a disorder. Okay? But these phenomena are the phenomena where we find most of the disorders, including the anxiety disorders, are rooted from a psychoanalytic point of view. So this is how psychoanalysis sees the causation of many disorders, including the anxiety spectrum disorders, okay, either by virtue of one of these phenomena or a combination of them.
In that case, how does psychoanalysis proceed with the healing of the anxiety spectrum disorder?
Uh, Essentially, it is through psychoanalytic psychotherapy, mostly on the couch. Some people may not use the couch, but mostly on the couch. In mild cases, we are looking at uh, once or twice a week for 6 months. And in moderate to severe cases, we are looking at twice a week, 4 times a week for 2 to 3 years. The approach essentially is cohesion to begin with. Because the first thing that a person with anxiety needs is a safe space. A safe space where he does not have to feel more anxious because of the therapy process itself, or more anxious because of the way the therapist himself is. So a safe space is the first requirement. The person should feel that he is completely accepted and not being persecuted, and he can express all those things which are difficult for him to own or express in that setting. A lot of holding has to take place, and in many cases the mirroring deficit of early life has to be met by mirroring and encouraging stance of the therapist. Once the person has been able to feel the safe space, start his articulation, own up the difficult parts of himself, and internalize the good, reliable, stable object of the therapist, and go through the mirroring phase and restart the arrested process of development. After that, we can get into the real interpretative work of what is causing the person the problem. Is it a Kleinian phenomena? Is it a Freudian phenomena? And then get into the classical psychoanalytic dynamics of the problem. In some cases, when we feel that the primary problem is because of signal anxiety and not the regular anxiety, then if signal anxiety is too high, one good approach can be the approach of ISTDP, where we try to focus upon bringing up those emotions, specifically anger, irritation, guilt, pain, which are covered up by the signal anxiety. So if we find that essentially we are dealing with signal anxiety, then after the cohesion holding, after some form of classical psychoanalytic exploration, we can go into the ISTDP mode to bring out those emotions covering up for which the signal anxiety is manifesting itself. So those are the broad areas in which psychoanalytic psychotherapy would proceed for healing the anxiety disorders.
So with your kind of experience, I'm quite tempted to ask you, is there, does holistic healing have a role to play in healing of anxiety spectrum disorder?
I think not only a role to play, but I would go to the extent of saying a substantial role to play. Because if we look at the relevance of holistic healing chapter wise, I think anxiety is a chapter where the role of holistic healing is very substantial. The first thing that an anxiety loaded person requires is relaxation, a break from this uncomfortable feeling of feeling anxiety 24/7. And tools of relaxation like Reiki, pranic healing, music, meditation, mantra, hypnotherapy relaxation, all those are very powerful tools to provide relaxation to the person. Second, tools like homeopathy, tools like guided visualization, tools like uh, peer group support, all those tools are very, very important. And in many cases, particular breathing techniques as well as Reiki have been found to be very calming and relief providing to anxiety patients. In certain cases, it has also provided with reasonably long-term relief to the person. So I think it has a very strong role to play, especially in this chapter.
Absolutely. Sir, and how about patient education? How important is that when we talk of anxiety spectrum disorder?
It's very, very important because the first thing that happens to a patient is he starts developing anxiety in response to the anxiety he is developing. The secondary anxiety because he does not know what is happening to him. So the moment we tell him what is happening to him, that uh, gnawing openness of the uh, anxiety to the infinite unknown that closes down to a finite known. And once the infinity is closed to a limited entity, the anxiety about what is happening to me reduces to a great extent. Two, he knows clearly the do's and don'ts. So once he is educated, what to do and what not to do, what will heal him and what will aggravate him, that having been known, he is able to manage himself much better. because he knows what to monitor and what to report. Fourth, he is able to develop or collect tools for himself in the area of holistic healing, or in the area of peer support, or in the area of non-profit help available to manage himself better, because he knows exactly what will help him. And he has scientific knowledge at his disposal. He is not proceeding on superstition or trial and error. And lastly, uh, he is able to sort of create a good idea of a good life and plan out his future in the view of his limitations and strengths in a very realistic and productive way. So all these are very important benefits of adequate psychoeducation provided to the patient.
As they say, awareness is empowerment.
It is very much so.
And how important is educating the caregivers, the patient, people, I mean, the parents, the caregivers, the family members of the patient?
Care is important as the patient education, because the first thing that should not happen is the caregiver should not panic more than the patient. So when the patient has an anxiety problem, the caregiver has to be a good container rather than an exploding material. That if he explodes, it will cascade the anxiety levels of the patient. So first, if the caregiver knows what is happening to the patient, he does not panic. One. Two, the caregiver knows the do's and don'ts on his part. And in many cases, this avoids unintentional acts on the part of caregiver which can aggravate that anxiety in the patient. Three, the caregiver also knows along with the patient what intervention measures, medical or therapy wise, are working or not working. Fourth, the caregiver also knows what to report or not report to the doctor or the therapist, what is relevant, what is not relevant. And fifth, very importantly, the caregiver is able to take his own care well, which is a part of his education, because in long-term caregiving, the caregiver often develops secondary problems of secondary depression, secondary anxiety, and so on. So the caregiver knows, because of our education, that he has to take care of himself first in order to be capable to take care of the patient. And all these reasons are the reasons why the caregiver education is so important. Unfortunately, in India, we are not doing adequate work in the area of patient education or caregiver education. I hope in the next 10 years, government and NGOs take up this task uh, in a more strong, competent, and profound way.
Absolutely. Yes, as you said, that's very important. The NGOs, the government coming forward and helping people with such kind of disorders. Thank you, Mr. Vaidya, always for sharing your immense knowledge with us. We've covered today chapter on, thank you. We've covered today chapter on anxiety spectrum disorder from the DSM-5. In our subsequent videos, we'll be covering many more chapters, essentially from the DSM-5. Do watch our coming videos. You can subscribe to our channel, you can press like, and more importantly, we wait for your comments. Your comments keep motivating us, and we wait for your comments. Feel free to write to us. Please do contact us. Thank you. Namaste.